The headlines are screaming betrayal. The internet is breathless with the Shakespearean drama of it all. The favorite daughter, the designated heir, supposedly delivering the fatal blow to her father's empire. Everyone is focusing on the emotional spectacle of Ivanka Trump walking into that hearing room, and if the reports are true, driving a stake through the heart of the MAGA movement. But if you are watching this channel, you know that we don't just look at the political soap opera, we look at the balance sheet. And what we are seeing today isn't just a family tragedy, it is a cold, calculated economic liquidation. You are watching a distressed asset, Donald Trump, being written off by his most savvy investors, his daughter and her husband. Welcome back. We need to talk about what actually happened in that courtroom, because while the media is obsessing over the "et tu, Ivanka" narrative, they are missing the systemic reality that made this flip inevitable. Today, sources indicate that Ivanka Trump has provided testimony under an immunity deal that corroborates the most damaging allegation against the former president, the monetization of state secrets. We are talking about the nuclear binder. We are talking about verified meetings with foreign intermediaries. But why now? Why would the woman who was once the polished face of the Trump organization turn state's evidence? The answer isn't about morality. It's about market positioning. Ivanka and Jared Kushner are no longer in the Trump business. They are in the global capital business, and they just decided that the former president is a liability they can no longer afford to carry. Let's break down exactly what has reportedly occurred, because the details are devastating. According to leaks from the closed-door proceedings, Ivanka didn't just offer vague recollections or "I don't recalls" as we've seen in previous civil fraud trials. This time, the testimony was specific. She reportedly confirmed the physical presence of classified documents, specifically a binder containing high-level nuclear intelligence in spaces accessible to unvetted guests. More critically, the testimony suggests she was aware of transactional conversations where this access was leveraged. This moves the needle from mishandling documents, which is a procedural crime, to selling access, which is a transactional crime. And in the world of high finance where Ivanka now operates, you don't go down for someone else's bad trade, even if that person is your father. To understand why this matters, we have to strip away the first family mythology and look at the Trumps for what they actually are. A family firm that operates less like a political dynasty and more like a mid-sized, privately held licensing company. For decades, the core product was the brand. Loyalty was the currency. But the economic reality of the Trump organization has shifted. The brand is now toxic to the kind of institutional capital Ivanka and Jared are courting, specifically the sovereign wealth funds and private equity giants that back Kushner's multi-billion-dollar investment firm. By testifying, Ivanka isn't just avoiding prison, she is fencing off her own assets and her husband's future earnings from the radioactive fallout of her father's legal solvency. Think about your own life for a second. If you found out your business partner, even a family member, was engaging in activity that could freeze your bank accounts, seize your home, and destroy your future employability, what would you do? You might love them, but the economic system we live in forces you to protect your own solvency first. That is the logic of capitalism applied to the family unit. Ivanka is making a rational market choice. She is decoupling her stock from a crashing company. The treason charge the media is buzzing about, in economic terms, that is simply the moment the liability became too high to hedge against. We are going to walk through the mechanics of this deal because it tells us everything about how power really works in America. This isn't just about one binder or one president. It is about how the very top tier of the asset-owning class protects itself when the walls start closing in. They don't go down with the ship. They board the lifeboats, which are usually plated in gold and purchased with immunity deals. When we come back, I want to explain the specific leverage the prosecutors likely used, the indictment arbitrage that forced Ivanka's hand, and why Jared Kushner's shadow is looming large over every word she said in that room. You might think this is about justice. I'm going to show you it's about asset forfeiture and the survival of the fittest in the American oligarchy. Let's dig into the background, because you cannot understand this testimony without understanding the business model that brought us here. For the last 40 years, the Trump business model has been rent-seeking. That is an economic term for increasing one's own wealth without creating any new wealth, essentially manipulating the social or political environment to get a bigger slice of the pie. Whether it was tax abatements in New York in the 80s or licensing deals in foreign capitals in the 2000s, the goal was always to monetize access and perception. When Donald Trump entered the White House, that business model didn't stop. It just scaled up. The products changed from luxury condos to policy shifts and allegedly intelligence. Ivanka was right there in the boardroom for the transition. She wasn't just a daughter, she was a senior executive. She understands the flow of information as a commodity better than anyone. When the administration ended, most people thought the grift was over. But for the Trump ecosystem, the post-presidency is just another phase of the business cycle. The possession of that nuclear binder wasn't just a souvenir. In the logic of this specific type of capitalism, it was inventory, it was leverage. And Ivanka knows that holding on to depreciating inventory that happens to be illegal is a bad business strategy. But here is where the class element kicks in, and this is what should make you angry. If you or I took a classified document from a secure facility, we wouldn't get a sit-down meeting to negotiate an immunity deal. We would be in a cell. The reason Ivanka gets to testify instead of being charged is because she possesses something the state wants more than her conviction, the head of the organization. This is the classic RICO playbook used against mob families, now being applied to a former presidency. The prosecutors leverage the junior executives, the children, by threatening their lifestyle, their freedom, and their future assets. They offer a binary choice, total ruin, or a comfortable life as a witness. Ivanka, who has spent her life curating an image of untouchable elegance, was never going to choose a prison jumpsuit. And we have to talk about Jared. You cannot separate Ivanka's decision from the $2 billion investment Jared Kushner secured from the Saudi Public Investment Fund shortly after leaving the White House. That money is their future. It is their entry ticket into the global oligarchy, far away from the tawdry legal battles of New York real estate. If Ivanka stays loyal to her father, she risks being dragged into a conspiracy that could freeze those assets or make them radioactive to international partners. By flipping, she is protecting the Kushner venture. She is signaling to the global markets, I am safe to do business with. I am not him. So, what we are witnessing is a hostile takeover of the narrative by the next generation. The nuclear secrets headline is shocking, yes, but the underlying story is about the ruthlessness of dynasty preservation. Ivanka is cutting off the dying limb to save the body. And as we continue, I want to show you exactly how the mechanics of this sale of secrets likely worked, not as a spy novel, but as a transaction, and who was actually buying. Let's look at the mechanics of how a former president allegedly sells secrets, because frankly, the Hollywood version of this is too sophisticated. We are not talking about dead drops in a park or encrypted briefcases. We are talking about the Mar-a-Lago model, which functions economically less like a secure facility and more like a membership club with a really dangerous VIP tier. In this ecosystem, classified documents are not treated as national security assets. They are treated as premium amenities. Think of it like the ultimate bottle service. If you are a foreign dignitary or a billionaire donor paying the initiation fee, you expect access that the general public doesn't get. The nuclear binder isn't just paper in this context. It is a prop. It is a tangible demonstration of ongoing relevance and power. From an economic incentive structure, this makes perfect sense for a figure like Donald Trump. Once the presidency ended, his primary asset, the ability to shape global policy, depreciated instantly. He needed a way to artificially inflate the value of his brand to keep the investors and the sycophants coming back. Showing off the cool stuff, as he reportedly called it, creates a perception of lingering authority. It signals, I still know things. I am still in the game. It is a marketing strategy. The problem is the inventory he was using to market himself belongs to the United States government, and the penalties for liquidating it are severe. Ivanka understands this distinction. She knows the difference between puffery, exaggerating the square footage of a penthouse, and espionage. One gets you a fine, the other gets you a federal prison sentence. This brings us to the mechanics of the flip itself. Why did Ivanka walk into that room and effectively terminate her father's defense? In game theory, we call this the prisoner's dilemma. But usually it applies to co-conspirators who have equal liability. Here the dynamic is different. Ivanka has what we call asymmetric information and asymmetric risk. She knows exactly what was in those boxes because she was part of the inner circle that managed the chaotic transition from the White House. But unlike her father, she has a long time horizon. She has 40 or 50 years of earning potential left. She has a social standing in New York and Miami to rehabilitate. The cost of loyalty to her was the total destruction of her future liquidity and social capital. The benefit was what? Approval from a man who by all accounts demands total submission but offers zero protection. That is a bad trade. So the prosecutors likely presented her with a simple balance sheet. On the liability side, potential indictment for conspiracy, obstruction, or mishandling of defense information, leading to asset freezing and incarceration. On the asset side, immunity, a clean slate, and the ability to go back to her life, albeit with a fractured family. For a rational economic actor, and make no mistake, Ivanka is the most rational actor in that family, the choice was mathematical. She sold the asset of her testimony to purchase her freedom. It is the same logic a hedge fund uses when it dumps a failing stock before the crash. You don't hold on out of sentimentality. You sell. Now, we need to talk about the key actors here because this isn't just a solo act. The media focuses on Trump, but he is just the distressed asset at the center of the web. The real story involves the network around him. First, you have the enablers, the lower-level aides and lawyers who move the boxes. They are the blue-collar workers of this crime, usually the first to be sacrificed. But Ivanka is management. Her testimony implicates the CEO directly. By confirming she saw the binder in the meetings, she strips away the rogue employee defense. Trump can't say, oh, the interns packed the wrong box. If his senior advisor, his daughter, says no, he showed it to people, that establishes intent. In criminal law, intent is everything. In economics, it is the difference between a market error and market manipulation. And we cannot ignore the silent partner in all of this, Jared Kushner. While Ivanka is the one on the stand, you have to imagine they made this decision as a single economic unit. Jared runs a private equity fund that manages billions of dollars, largely from foreign sovereign wealth funds. Do you think those investors want their money managed by a guy whose wife is a co-defendant in an espionage trial? Absolutely not. That capital is sensitive to headline risk. For Jared's business to survive, Ivanka has to be cleared. She has to be a witness, not a target. It is very likely that the immunity deal was structured not just to save her, but to firewall the Kushner family assets from the Trump legal black hole. This brings us to the buyers, the foreign intermediaries mentioned in the reports. Who are they? We don't have the full list yet, but look at who hangs out at Mar-a-Lago. We are talking about representatives from governments that have a vested interest in American nuclear capabilities, energy policies, and alliances. In a functioning market, information is sold for a price. What was the price here? Was it a direct payment? Unlikely. It was more likely payment in kind. Investments, approvals for properties abroad, or just the ego boost of being treated like a head of state. Trump was trading state secrets for validation and future business prospects. Ivanka saw the transaction logs, metaphorically speaking. She saw the guests. She saw the binder. And she realized that this wasn't just politics anymore. It was a fire sale of national security, and she was standing too close to the flames. The tragedy here, if you want to call it that, is that Trump likely believed his own marketing. He thought the rules of the family business, where the CEO is king and the children are serfs, would override the rules of the federal legal system. He thought biology was a binding contract, but he forgot the first rule of the Shark Tank he raised his children in. Everyone looks out for number one. He trained Ivanka to be a killer in business. He just never thought she would use those skills on him. But this goes beyond just one family's drama. We have to zoom out and look at the wider consequences of what this testimony means. Because when the president's daughter confirms that the commander-in-chief was treating nuclear codes like party favors, it shatters something fundamental in the global order. It signals to every ally and every adversary that the American security apparatus is for sale if you can get close enough to the right narcissist. As we move to the next part of this analysis, I want to talk about those wider consequences. What does it do to the stability of the US dollar or the trust in American institutions when the world sees that our highest secrets are just chips on a poker table? And I want to talk about the human impact, not on the Trumps who will be fine in their mansions, but on the intelligence officers and service members whose lives are put at risk when this kind of data leaks. Because while Ivanka is saving her skin, there are people out there in the field who are now in danger because of her father's vanity. That is the real cost of this business model. It is an externalized cost dumped on the public, while the profits or the immunity are privatized by the family. We need to zoom out, because if you treat this strictly as a legal drama, you miss the economic catastrophe happening in the background. When the daughter of a former president testifies that state secrets were treated like loose inventory, she is effectively announcing the devaluation of the American state itself. In economics, we talk about institutional trust as a tangible asset. It is the reason the US dollar is the global reserve currency. It is the reason investors buy treasury bonds. They trust that the United States is a stable, rule-following entity that keeps its secrets and honors its contracts. What Ivanka just described is a system where that stability was leveraged for personal gain, where the state ceased to be a public guardian and became a private bazaar. Think about the signal this sends to the global markets. Stability is priced into everything you buy, from gas to mortgages. When the perceived stability of the US government drops, when we look like a banana republic where the former leader sells nuclear intel to the highest bidder, the risk premium on America goes up. Allies stop sharing intelligence. Foreign investors hedge their bets. The diplomatic leverage we use to negotiate trade deals or peace treaties evaporates because the person across the table thinks, "Why should I trust you? Your last president sold your playbook." This isn't just embarrassing, it is expensive. It weakens the entire infrastructure of American power, which ultimately hits your wallet in the form of higher prices, economic volatility, and a less secure future for your children. But the most infuriating part of this story is the externalized cost. In capitalism, an externality is when a corporation makes a profit but dumps the cost of pollution on the community. That is exactly what the Trump family has done with national security. They privatized the benefits, the ego boost, the leverage, the potential business deals from being in the know, but they socialized the risk. We are the ones who have to live in a world where nuclear proliferation is more likely because Donald Trump wanted to impress a guest. We are the ones who pay the price when global alliances fracture. They took the asset, the secrets, and left us with the liability, the danger. And this brings us to the human impact, which is where the class divide becomes lethal. I want you to think about the people who actually gather this intelligence. We are not talking about billionaires in suits. We are talking about career civil servants, military personnel, and foreign assets, people often working for government salaries, risking their lives in hostile environments to keep this country safe. When a nuclear binder goes missing, or when sources and methods are exposed to foreign intermediaries, those people don't get an immunity deal. They get executed. They get imprisoned. Their families are targeted. There is a sickening asymmetry here. Ivanka Trump walks into a hearing room in a designer suit, surrounded by high-priced lawyers, negotiates a deal to protect her inheritance, and walks out to a waiting SUV. Meanwhile, somewhere in the world, an intelligence asset, someone who believed in the promise of American protection, might be disappearing into a black site because their identity was in a document that ended up as a prop at a Mar-a-Lago dinner. That is the reality of this transaction. Real human lives are the collateral damage of the Trump family's vanity. This also exposes the two-tiered justice system that defines modern America. If a low-level analyst at the NSA had taken a single classified page home to show a friend, the FBI would have kicked down their door in an hour. They would be facing decades in prison under the Espionage Act. There would be no negotiation. There would be no delicate handling to avoid political appearances. They would be crushed by the full weight of the state. But when you are part of the ownership class, when you are a Trump or a Kushner, the law becomes a negotiation. You trade testimony for freedom. You leverage your status to avoid the consequences that would destroy a normal person. Ivanka's flip is being framed as a victory for justice, and in a narrow sense, it is. But in a broader sense, it is a reminder that in America, justice is a commodity, and you get as much as you can afford. This erodes the social contract. Why should you follow the rules? Why should you pay your taxes, obey the speed limit, and respect the law when the people at the very top treat the most serious laws on the books, laws about nuclear survival, as optional guidelines? It breeds cynicism. It makes people feel like the system is rigged, because frankly, it is. When the elites can monetize treason and then cut a deal to walk away, it breaks the fundamental promise of democracy, that no one is above the law. As we look at the fallout, we have to recognize that this is also a story about the failure of checks and balances. The system was designed to prevent a tyrant, but it wasn't designed to handle a grifter family that treats the executive branch like a liquidation sale. The institutions, the DOJ, the archives, the intelligence community, moved too slowly because they were afraid of the politics. They treated Trump like a president even when he was acting like a fence for stolen goods. That hesitation, that deference to power, allowed this danger to persist for years. Ivanka's testimony is happening now, but the damage was done long ago. We are seeing the consequences of a political economy that values wealth over duty. The Trumps are the ultimate expression of a culture that says greed is good and winning is everything. In their world, there is no such thing as public service. There is only private opportunity. And when that mindset captures the White House, the presidency itself becomes just another distressed asset to be stripped for parts. Ivanka didn't have a moral awakening. She just realized the salvage operation was over and it was time to exit the market. In the next section, I want to reflect on what this tells us about the structural problems of our system. How did we let a family like this get the keys to the kingdom in the first place? And more importantly, how do we fix the systemic loopholes? The lack of oversight, the deference to executive power, the corruption of money in politics that allowed the nuclear binder to become a bargaining chip. Because if we don't fix the structure, another Trump will come along, and next time they might be smarter. They might not leave a paper trail for their daughter to find. We need to talk about the board of directors of America, the voters, the institutions, and the media, and how they failed to audit this company before it was too late. This isn't just about punishing Donald. It's about inoculating the system against the next hostile takeover. Let's get into the structural fixes and the hard truths about American capitalism and democracy.